Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm here again with Greg and Janet and Elen and Sarah for another CHS dialogue, where we'll be talking about the question related to our, let's see now, 12. Is that right? From the Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours. And that question is, does the Odyssey have an ending that resolves everything?
Everything.
The shorter the question, the longer the answer. That's the rule that I learned.
Yes, yes, yes.
With a word like everything, I want to say no. I mean, for the first.
Yes, well, I would say everything for the moment. That is to say, every time you experience the Odyssey, all the questions that you might have, in my mind, just really come together. Of course, it's true that there are different questions every time I'm exposed to the Odyssey, so it's not absolutely everything, but it's. I know there's a wonderful literary, critical, and philosophical expression. It's totalizing. It creates.
What do you mean by that?
It creates the sense of totality. And can I bring up something that I learned from reading the observations, the analyses of ethnographers who study epic traditions in India, especially in lower caste social contexts. What they find in the course of interviews as well as recordings of performances about heroes is that if you think of the entire narrative arc of what we moderns would call an epic, it may take not just hours but days to narrate the whole thing, to narrate everything. But when you interview somebody who has attended a festival and who might have heard, and you can verify this, only, let's say, 2 hours of epic, the interviewee may still say, I heard the whole thing. In other words, the wholeness, the integrity of the composition is not textual, it's notional. And it has to do with the feeling of completion or even satisfaction, emotional as well as intellectual, that you get from participating in a performance of what you and I are now calling epic. And so an epic can be total, even if you hear only a part of it, because in a sense, there's already a reception of something that is imagined as a totality. It doesn't have to be actualized as a totality in the context of any one performance. So if you do it that way, then it's okay to say that if you think about the Odyssey performatively, then by the time you get through Odyssey 24, it is everything, quote unquote.
So I'm thinking maybe of like how the Iliad doesn't tell the death of Achilles, but
yes,
it's there because Patroclus is there.
Patroclus is there, and
it's some connection to everything.
Yeah, it's a signpost for the experience, the painful experience of going through the sad ending, so to speak, of the death of Achilles. But there's so many other things like that in the Iliad. Is when we experience the catalog of ships in Iliad 2, well, that should have happened in the first year of the Trojan War, not in the last year of the Trojan War. When we meet Helen, as if for the first time, it's not the first time. Helen has been around for 10 years at Troy. So why do we get that wonderful thrill of seeing her for the first time? Because in the context of the very limited narrative arc of the Iliad, even introducing Helen at a special point is like seeing her for the very first time. So that's totalizing too. And the list can go on and on. Almost everything that you and I, as moderns, may think of as a novelty because we're not used to the tradition, and we see something for the first time in a performance, we somehow think, well, that's the first time. Well, it isn't the first time. And even within the experiential world of people who are listening to the Iliad and the Odyssey in a song culture, you will relate to an epithet like rosy fingered or rosy toed applied to Dawn. Not only the way you hear it immediately in the context of performance, but the way you heard it 115 times in your lifetime, and where even the epithet that is applied to Dawn is something that is part of your emotional world.
I have to confess that I started off this discussion by saying what I thought, but I want to look at some of the responses that we got from the participants.
Absolutely.
Do you three have anything you'd like to bring forward? Because I have one if you don't.
Well, in the same way then Odysseus, we hear about his death in scroll 11.
Yes.
From Tiresias.
Yes.
But we don't really witness his death in the Odyssey.
No.
So we know how it's going to happen, but we don't see it.
And then there's an extra teaser, which is that when Odysseus is finally reunited with Penelope and they engage in pillow talk, and there's a kind of selective remembering by Odysseus of things that Penelope would enjoy hearing, and the prophecy of Tiresias comes up again, and it's not clear to me exactly what the response of Penelope is. I keep looking at that response and I'm saying, gee, it's as if Penelope were thinking, well, let's not think about that for now.
Mm-hmm.
This is a different part of the story. I'm happy.
Right. To go back to the example I brought up before, it's like the Iliad is saying, let's not think about Achilles dying.
Yes, but then you can't help it because Patroclus's death forces you to think about it, even though you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, this question of his death, the first response that I see here addressed that question, and we don't know anything about. I mean, we know the kind of essential details about his journey from the sea up into regions away from the sea and what he's carrying, but we don't know.
Yes.
You know, is he alone? Will he get into other troubles? What about Telemachus?
And here's another thing, dear friends, which is that in the Odyssey, it's not made explicit anywhere that I can find that Odysseus is going to be traveling uphill. It's just away from the sea. But in other versions of this kind of narrative, and I'm thinking of the prophet Elijah narratives, it's not just away from the sea, and more distant from the sea, but higher and higher and higher up above sea level, which is a kind of reinforcement. And that is, of course, much more relevant to Christian Orthodox views of the prophet Elijah, because his shrines are supposed to be on the top of elevations, geographical elevations, mountaintops, hilltops, and I once heard a beautiful story by a Greek American lady who told the story about a new generation versus the older generation of Greek Americans who were building a church that was going to be holy to the prophet Elijah, Elias, and so the older generation wanted to have the church high up on an elevation in Salt Lake City, whereas the newer generation were thinking of something that's ground level because it was more convenient or whatever reasons, for modern reasons. And then I forget exactly how it happened, but then there was an earthquake or a fire or whatever, and so the ground level shrine of the prophet Elijah was destroyed. I love that story. I can't verify all of this. We'll have to do some fact checking here, but it's a great story, isn't it?
It sounds like something Poseidon might do, destroy something.
Well, yes, yes, he would. Yes, he would. Yes, he would. So anyway, you're quite right that the themes of the Odyssey are not all fleshed out in our Odyssey, but that's why maybe any kind of gesture, any kind of narrative gesture towards completion or towards a kind of finalizing where notionally all the loose threads are gathered, and we come out with a sense of wholeness, totality, is a very performative mentality, and it shows how the composition of the Iliad and the Odyssey cannot be viewed purely as composition. It's an organic matter of performance as well.
So another point that some of the participants are bringing up is connecting it with what we've been reading in hour 12, which is the Hesiodic view of decay and the obvious idea of the cult hero, which was also part of the question, and
yes.
Also tying it in with the garden we see Laertes tending, that reconnecting with those generations, and that kind of metaphor of the plants.
Yes.
As well.
Yes, and it's such a beautiful metaphor of how a garden, when it's well arranged, well ordered, is something that is like a cosmos that is notionally perfect. And I love the fact that it's not just a mnemonic trick that Odysseus recognizes the orchard, and that Laertes, the father, will recognize Odysseus recognizing the orchard. What's perhaps most important is that he was taught, Odysseus was taught from childhood on, where every plant in the orchard is located, what the rationale is, how it all fits together, so to speak. And those lessons in the ABCs of the orchard of Odysseus, which was put together for him by his father, who represents the entire line of ancestors that goes from way back all the way to the father and then eventually to the son himself. And when I say ancestors, I do mean fathers and mothers, because the word pater in the plural is already cross-gender. It will already refer to male and female antecedents. That kind of diachrony, that is to say, a cognitive experience where it's not just one instant, but a whole series of instants accumulating into something that is meaning for the present. That kind of thing is, again, to me, a perfect example of how the medium that we're studying here, the medium of the Odyssey, the medium of the Iliad, is performative as well as compositional.
And that idea of the fruitfulness of the land is another connection again with that cult as well. And also, as you were speaking about the sort of things coming to an end, but then there's the cyclical
Yes.
nature of nature, or of cultivated fruits.
Yeah.
You get a crop, and then you get a new season, and it's
Yes,
get it all over again.
And thank you so much for mentioning that, Sarah. I don't know. I remember as a child being terrified of the idea of eternity, because I could only visualize it as something linear, and the idea that, oh, this is a good place to stop, and the idea that no, you have to keep going, and seemingly into a linear eternity was terrifying. Whereas if things come full circle and there's wilting and then re-blossoming, somehow that is comforting, reassuring, and no longer as terrifying as linear eternity, because it is coming full circle. And I love the fact that the Greek word that we translate as always, or for eternity, aie, A-I-E-I, aie, that was, if you reconstruct it further back, the locative case of the noun aion, which means coming full circle. So it's a kind of eternity that is predicated on vegetation dying and then coming back to life again. And death and life are so organically a matter of a cycle that still adds up to life as the dominant theme and death as the recessive theme.
And we are going to listen to this story from any point of time again. So
yes,
we are resolving some issues.
yes,
But we are going to hear more about this story again and again.
Again and again. And so the return to the orchard is a wonderful homecoming, very comfortable, very comforting, that makes it understandable why Penelope, when Odysseus tells the prophecy of his death, to say, okay, but let's not concentrate on that now. There's time for everything. And in the Hebrew Bible, in which Keith is such an expert, there are all sorts of very famous passages about turning and coming back, and a sense of the eternal recycling of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as one example, the vision of the end times, or of, well, let's just say, yeah, the end of the world is a recreation of the world at its beginning. It's a return to the Garden of Eden.
I love it. And even the word telos, T-E-L-O-S in Greek, seems to be derived from a root that has to do with circularity. So the end is the end as we think of it, only if we're thinking linear.
Speaking of there being time for everything, there isn't on this occasion. But before we go, I wanted to make sure that we talked about winnowing fans and winnowing shovels.
Yes. And here's the thing, which is that there are many different implements that are used, even in the Mediterranean world of Greek-speaking people in ancient times, that there are many implements that function as winnowing implements. That is to say, separating the chaff, which blows away to one side, even by way of the slightest breeze, and then the grain, the real McCoy, the kernel, which tends to drop vertically down to the ground. And of course, it's never absolutely vertical, just as the wind blows away the chaff, not absolutely diagonally. But if you keep working at this, whatever implement you use to separate the grain from the chaff of wheat primarily is a painstaking process that lasts for a very long time, very tiring, and not all these implements look alike. So the only one that really looks like an oar, which is what is needed in the Odyssey so that landlocked people can be mistaking the oar of Odysseus for a winnowing implement, is what I prefer to translate as a winnowing shovel. And here is an illustration of a winnowing shovel. It doesn't look quite like an oar, but at least the blade looks like an oar, doesn't it? Conversely, if you translate the Greek word that is in play here as winnowing fan, I think you're really misleading English-speaking readers, because a fan is shaped differently than a shovel. And a fan can also be used as a winnowing implement. Think of a winnowing fan as the kind of rake. I'm thinking of those metallic prongs, let's say 10 metallic prongs that radiate out of a stem, and then you rake with that. And similarly, if you flip that around, you can toss the harvested wheat into the air, and again the breeze blows the chaff off to the side, and the grain falls more or less vertically down to the ground, or at least if you keep on doing it, that's what it'll add up as. Sure, winnowing fan can be used for that, just as a winnowing shovel, but for our Odyssey, the only way that the riddle makes sense is if you visualize what we see here, a winnowing shovel, not a winnowing fan. I'm sorry to be harping on this, but it just shows that when you get archaeological with Homeric poetry, you have to be pretty sure about what the material culture is you're dealing with, because sometimes what works for one era doesn't work for another era, and that can result in blurring of the message and even confusion. But isn't it nice? Isn't it nice that in a sense, if you get it right, then there is no confusion. And why? Because you're separating the real thing from the unreal thing. So in a sense, even the way I'm talking is a way of expressing the idea of winnowing. I'm trying to separate what's genuine from what is non-genuine for the purpose of the narration in performance. So it's a very nifty symbol, isn't it?
It's like a little Inos, a little riddle.
Absolutely.
You have to be informed enough to know how to solve it, I guess we could say.
Absolutely. And then that means you have to have the background. And if you don't, you lose the riddle. You get confused.
Great. I'm so glad we got to show that picture.
I am too.
And Sarah, thank you.
Could I mention one thing that was very funny? There was one time I was putting together something where you think you're going to get a piece of furniture, but instead you get pieces of furniture rather than the furniture itself. And so then you have to take a screwdriver and all sorts of other tools and try to put together the piece of furniture. And in one case, there was a set of instructions where the person who was writing the set of instructions, who I'm pretty sure was okay, I'm giving it away, had a Confucian background. And so the instructions said, to avoid Confucianism, so you could say that's a riddle too. Because it's not Confucianism you want to avoid, it's confusion. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that.
I think I've heard that one before on some occasions.
I think you have. You hear things, you young ones, from Grandpa, if you stick around long enough, which is again the joy of performance, isn't it?
It is. It's like a circle, or an eternally recurring cycle. Well, on that note, all of you out there will stick with us. Return next time.
Look forward to it. We'll recycle again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye for now.